Comrades, it's Premier Rever, and I am back again for another test. I've set up some towns on a map with very hard difficulty of keeping people happy. Now, at the same time, I have turned off fires and energy usage and simple education, so everything else is really easy except for keeping people happy. And the reason for that is I didn't want those other things that tend to interfere. Plus, it also helps make the test a little bit simpler. Because what I have done is I have gone around and built 9 towns. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and all the way down here 9. Now, 2 of these towns I built kind of far away from the other ones because these hospitals, even if you're not attached by road, they have an area effect, and I didn't want that area effect to interfere with each other, right? So that's why this one's all the way down here, far away, so there's no double hospital effect, and the hospital effect of this one doesn't affect these other towns. This is actually like the 3rd test I've run, and I have a pretty good indication of what's going to happen. At first, I was a little surprised, and I had made simpler tests, so now let me lay out the test itself. So what I have here is a town that I'm calling Nothing. Here, let me get rid of that wireframe. I have no idea why I still have that on. Sorry about that. So we have Nothing here. Well, we do. Every town has a shopping center. All the shopping centers are auto purchasing. So the people in each one of these buildings should be able to have their basic needs met regardless of the town. And they're all set up very similar to this with add-ons. So if we come over to pub only, it's pretty much as it's named. We have a pub here. And the basics. The very basics as far as that goes. Cinema. See, I left an extra room, right? There's no pub here, so when there is things together, there's no walking issues. And I don't think that that's really significant, but hey, why not lay it out as close as possible and eliminate. So then we have sports only. So we have a sporting thing over here. And then we have pub sports. So you can see we have a pub and sports. And I think you guys are getting the gist of this. And then we have pub and cinema. And then we have the basics. So this is all 3 of these. Now, I'm sure you could come up and say, well, there's some other combination. And then this is what I'm describing as everything. All right. So in other words, I think that this is everything that you would normally need in order to keep people happy, which is including a hospital amongst the other things. So the basics would be without the hospital, and everything is including the hospital. Now over here, I decided, because of potential issues, and we'll get into it later, I don't want to give away the test. Here, what I did was I had a pub and a hospital. All right. So other than that, they don't have anything else. So just see the effect of just a hospital with only a pub. And again, there's kind of reasons, and I know there's probably more combinations that you could do, but I think this will demonstrate well enough the problems and the issues and give us a good idea of how the happiness is working. So what I want to do for now, and I found this to be a very good way of doing it in the last 2 times I tested. I'd be willing to bet money that the difference between these 3 houses is going to be very minimal. So whatever we look at the one, we'll be able to get an idea. And this is more for me and my testing. So what I think I'm going to do is just come along here. I don't know if I can get all the screens up here, and I'm going to cut the video off once I get started rolling on this test. But I just want to kind of get them all open so that as I do the test, I'll show you what I'm going to sit here and do. Now, I've done the test enough, so I'm just picking each that I know. I know I can kind of walk away from this, and it's not going to change. Things will steadily decline, right? They're not going to. So this is pub sports. I don't have. Do I have? Yeah, pub sports is not open. I should have 9 of these when I'm all done, and then the other. I'll show you another little trick. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I need to move this over. So this was the basics. And I guess I should probably shrink some of these down. This is the first time I've done the test with 9. So let's just, I'll probably start shrinking everything And then I should have another one way over here. Pub hospital. Yeah. All right, there we go. So let me just shrink. And I can pop into here. I'm going to end the test. Maybe I'll do something along these lines. I'm going to end the test when one of the cities, whichever one, starts running out of workers, and what'll happen is like they'll have enough escapes or enough deaths or whatever it is that they'll stop getting full food, right? Like in other words, there's not enough people to consistently work in the shopping center, and that's when I'll stop the test. Just for your guys' anticipation, we'll see how long that takes, but let's go ahead and see what happens. So, like I said, let's fast forward. By the way, I built everything and then I moved people in. So all of them should be very even to start out. And we're just going to see what happens. I'll keep an eye and I'll come back and I'll let you know. I expected to take a little while, like too long for the video, for you guys to just sit there watching it, fast forwarding. Maybe we could do nothing flats, and I'll just sit here keeping an eye on them until something happens. But it'll take a little while. It'll take a couple months to get a good result. And I'll try to note when our escapes start happening. Might even take a look here. So if I do like this year, well, we can only have this year, but no escape so far. So I'll note when our first escape was, and then we'll be able to see the little chart down here later on. All right. Well, let me cut the video, and then we'll see what happens in a few months. Okay, I think the test has run long enough, and I wanted to talk to you about a couple different observations first that happened as time was going along. One of the things to point out, One of the things to point out is that when you first started out, and it's going to be a little hard to see, I wish you could have check boxes here where we keep these open. The number of deaths goes up and down a fair amount, and there's certainly a cycle to it, but don't panic too much. If you look close at that graph, just wanted to point out that the number of births lagged behind the number of deaths. So our population dropped quite a bit in the very beginning before they even, there was quite a few deaths, 100 and some deaths before you ever had the first birth. If you can kind of see, it's sort of reflected in there. I hope you guys can see that on whatever screen you're looking at. And just keep that in mind that over time, though, things sort of evened out, but then they fell off. One of the reasons I chose these three is that it should be enough people to be a more or less sustainable population. You could argue that maybe the test would have been a little bit different if I had 4 houses in here. But you'll see as we look at each of the things that it is sustainable if they're happy. But in any event, the bottom line is by the end of it, our population started decreasing. We started getting more and more, where the other computer's going nuts with notices over there, isn't it? The population started getting, more and more escapes. And that certainly, started to hurt us at some point. But notice the escapes dropped off. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that we had all of these different towns. In other words, each town had a little bit different. So as more people may have escaped from the pubs only or something, that would have thrown the numbers up. But then after a while, people weren't necessarily escaping from these other towns that may have had more happiness, or I hope that makes sense. All right, so let's take a look. And the results aren't overly surprising. The worst thing you can do, for the most part, is to have just a pub. So the average lifespan dropped down to 62, but really when you get down to it, the most important thing when you think about it is the number of workers you have left. So here, look, 44. So it means it's not really, it's the average lifespan of the people in the house, which is a little bit weird, I think. Because as soon as one of these people leaves, it may change drastically when you only have 2 people. But the bottom line is between this whole town, we only have, 7, that would be 12, plus another 2 is 14 people left. So by putting a pub in, you are decreasing their lifespan, I guess because they're becoming alcoholics and dying younger. But the most interesting thing about that is the nothing town. The whole most interesting thing about this whole test is the nothing town. Let's go over there. This is just a town, and all it has is its supplies met. They still have 66 people. Now let's see. Let's check the other 53. So it's a little lower. This might be an outlier, right? Yeah, so that's probably an overestimate. I think it's fair to say that they have 58 people. So let's close this one, and we'll count that as 58 because that's about in the middle of the three houses. So by building absolutely nothing, you were far better off than building a pub, right? So in other words, the lifespan is a far bigger issue here than your happiness, is what I would say. Now, these people, the other funny thing about this is these people happiness is similar. It didn't seem to go down as much. Now, I don't understand why, like, their hospital didn't go down, but the closest hospital is like all the way over here. So I don't understand, like there's a weird thing up there. It is the weird thing happening with this happiness and the people who, I don't doubt that some people have escaped. I'm not suggesting that you build nothing. I'm just saying that you're better off building nothing than building just a pub. So let's shrink this and take a look. Now what if you just decided I only want to build sports? It's certainly better than nothing, right? 66. So let's go take a look over at the sports only town. So I just want to open up each one of these again just to make sure that what we're looking at, 66 is on the high scale. Probably be fair to say 62. So I think it's fair. Let's just leave this 64 open for a second. So the point is that, you're going to be in the low 60s if we had to give a rating out of, 0 to 75. Certainly putting just a pub in. So if you just want to put sports in, you'll do a little better than putting nothing in. Certainly not a bad thing to do. I think kept a few more people happy. High average lifespan here. Okay, so let's go to cinema only, because that's sort of the next one in line, right? So if you had sports only, then what if you just put in a cinema? 62. We'll pop over to that town, see how we line up. 68, 62, 59. So once again, 62, probably a pretty good, average number. Again, your results may vary. I'm sure there are individual circumstances that don't make 62 some exact number. But really, you would have to say, let's start putting these in order. So we would have to say that really doing the cinema and the pub is really just, if you just wanted to put one thing in, it's really about a tie. So what do we have? So now we have cinema pub. So this is, pub sports. Yeah, I didn't do, so what I would be curious about, maybe I should have done it, is cinema and sports with no pub, right? Because I think you might have had a better results with that. But let's take a look at pub sports and cinema pub. Cinema pub 51. So in other words, as soon as you put in that pub, you get an immediate negative impact. And again, we'll just go real quick, double check that it's not some 46 is lower, 50. Why don't we go with the 50? Again, you could argue it might be 49, but whatever. Let's shrink that down. Let's see what this guy had. Oh, 16 cinema pub. Ooh. Let's go take a look at that one. So there's cinema pub, right? 15. So really, boy, that's a funny result. Not exactly what you would expect. Why did the pub... Here, let's close that. Oops. Cinema pub. Yeah, this one. Yeah, so what was that one? This one over here, right? Yeah, 15. Well, they're all pretty much 15, so or two of them are 15. Why don't we go with 15? 15. Let's move this down. Right, sports pub, 50, and this is 64. So nothing flats is going to be there. And then this is better. You're better off with the cinema and the pub than just the pub. And again, is there something else goofy? I mean, I really tried to make all these towns pretty even. So, but definitely the sports and the pub is a better combination for whatever weird reason. But then again, in real life, I guess you could argue the same thing, couldn't you? And if you say, well, the sports is more important, well, then why is sports only pretty much tied with cinema only? It seems like if you give people liquor and the pub, you do better. All right, so let's take a look at the next one. I would think would be the basics flats, right? So in other words, let's go take a look at what that means again. Oops. That means they pretty much have everything that I would consider normal besides a hospital. So they have some sports, they have some cinema. 57. So when we compare that, it's less than just putting in the sports. Now let's make sure that that wasn't some goofiness of being higher than the rest. No, as a matter of fact, maybe you could say 55, but certainly 57 is a fair enough number for the accuracy of our tests here. So let me move this guy up, just so we're kind of putting them in a ranking order. What is this one? 50. Yeah, so that's where that one belongs. So just putting everything in got us to here. Now, here is everything flats. Let me open it up over here. We'll go over there. So that's everything, including a hospital. 54. Now, let's see. Is that an outlier, or is that pretty much in line with the other? It's pretty much in line. Actually, I'd probably say 57 in this case. Right? So what I would say about that is, right, because that other one was, what, 60? Yeah, that's that one. That one. Yeah, see, this was 62, so kind of the middle. It would be fair to use this 57 number. Take the results for what you were, which is pretty much the same thing. You could argue that putting in the hospital had no real effect on the number of people, because this is the same thing as the basics. It's just that it has a hospital. So we'll put that right next door to there. And then we'll take a look at the pub hospital. So we'll take a look at what that means, just so you have a visual representation. So all we have is a pub, and all we have is a hospital. And again, let's check to make sure. 53, yeah, that's a little bit, to say that this is 62 is probably a bit less. So I'd put it in the 59 range, maybe, closer to 62 than 53. But let's just keep that in mind as we place it in order. So when we take a look, we have 64 here, and then we have 57. Really, I think for all practical purposes, it may be a little bit less than this, but it's in line with the everything else flats. So there's obviously some arguable things going on. 57, and again, it's two of them at 62, one at 53. You'd almost have to argue that it's higher. Let's put it off to the side here, kind of in between, right? I didn't do the math to tell you what the exact average is, but it should be right around, pretty close to 57, if not a little bit higher, like 59. So somewhere, there we go. So that's according to this test with the number of people that's left, and you can pick on the test all you want. It is what it is, and I'm just trying to show you my conclusions, and you could say the quote results, though obviously there may be some things I didn't think of, but the worst thing you can do is just put in a pub. Really, I would be very curious about this result, that just putting in the cinema gave us the best results. Now, could you run the test further if there was more people in the town? That's just very curious to me. Here's the next one. All their happiness is up. And the fact that these guys have a pub is bringing down their average lifespan. The hospital's probably saving a couple people, but not enough. But just not enough. The happiness here is high enough that you probably didn't have many escapes. What is the average lifespan? 6. And the average lifespan's not lowered because you don't have pollution and you don't have. So it's really about the lifespan almost. I mean, you want to keep them happy enough, but it's really about the lifespan. And if you add that hospital, it doesn't seem to make a big difference on their average lifespan, like an extra year. So again, maybe there's some slight benefit to the hospital between these two, but certainly there's a far bigger impact by putting in a pub. I would really say that the conclusion I have to come to is that you just really shouldn't put in a pub. I mean, you're just really better off without them in almost every case. You're better off doing nothing than putting in a pub. And it's not until you start putting in everything that it makes up for the pub, right? It's not like we have kind of all the other entertainments to make up for the fact that you have a pub. And even then, I think what you're doing is forcing people not to go to the pub. So there you go. So I definitely learned something. And like I said, this is not the first time I got this basic result, though I didn't have 9 cities before. And to some degree, I do wish that I had made a cinema and sports test, but because I think that might even be better if you just did the cinema and the sports. And again, if you want a hospital, have at it. It doesn't really make much difference. That's my opinion. And again, it's the results. Like, how are these better if the hospital makes such a difference as far as the number of people? There we go. So let me know if you have any comments or questions about it. I could show you the statistics one last time, and let's do this year. And just, you can always pause it and look where you want. But there was our population of 21-year-olds or working age people. Just so you know, like, we had a couple 21-year-olds, but we never got to the point that people were dying just as fast as we were making 21-year-olds. And I think if you put in a 4th house, you may start getting more. Because we definitely were making a good number of babies for a while. So, and this wasn't a test about how we grow our population. You can see it started dipping back off. And I don't know that it wouldn't start picking back up again, depending on the swing of babies. You got a high number of babies, then they get lower. Then the number, now we have a big boost in the number of children. So we might start seeing our population surge back up because we have a lot of children of a certain age. So I think there's a certain flow to all of that to not get too excited about. And some of that, the reason I mention is it could be playing with these numbers, right? If there's a swing in the population, but again, I mean, the numbers are what they are, and you could take it further. But I think the real lesson is, don't put in a pub. As much as those of us that like a good beer or a mixed drink would, or just a shot of something, or a glass of wine might disagree that, the pub is evil. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know if you have questions or comments about it. And don't be too harsh on me. I tried to make a pretty fair test here that was a reasonable learning experience. So thanks. Have a good night or day. Bye-bye.